Hey, Covenant Church, welcome to our midweek word of encouragement. If you're just joining us, we've been in the Psalms this Easter, both on Sunday morning and in these midweek words of encouragement that are much briefer than a sermon. But I'm mindful today as we come on April Fool's Day of an old hero of mine from the A-Team. Do you remember him, Mr. T? And he'd always warn us not to be a fool, right? And I want us to approach the Psalms today in such a way as to not be a fool on April Fool's Day. Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool says in his heart that there is no God." That's foolishness, says the psalmist. The fool in his heart says there is no God. But I'd like to turn to Psalm 91 to see what the wise man does in light of a big and protective and delivering God. Here's Psalm 91 this morning, just the first number of verses. He says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. And I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." You know what the wise man says today? You know what the wise man does today on April Fool's? Even in the midst of a virus of COVID-19, where there's so easy to have fear and mistrust, a wise man dwells in the shelter of the Most High, of a big God, a God who is over all things, sees all things, ordains all things, holds all things, and holds us in all things. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High is a wise man. He who abides in the shadow of the Almighty, of this big God, the shadow of His word, the shadow of His protection, the shadow of His love, that is a wise man. And that wise man will say to the Lord, "You are my refuge, you are my fortress, and in you I trust." That's what a wise man says today, even in the midst of the uncertainties of the things around us with COVID-19, with our own inadequacies to understand the things that are going on, our uncertainty of being sequestered in our homes, of not knowing when we'll be back worshiping together, being together, and allowing our normals to reinstate. We indeed run to dwell in the shelter of the Most High, abide in the shadow of the Almighty, to say to the Lord, He is our refuge and our fortress, one in whom we'll trust. You know why we can trust Him? It goes on in Psalm 91, "For He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence." He's a delivering God. He is a delivering God. This COVID-19 is one thing that will come and pass, but even more so in the long picture of God, he not only will deliver us from this virus and care for us and nurture us, but He's given an even greater deliverance as we think about Easter, is He not? That He has sent His Son Jesus to live for us, sent His Son Jesus to die for us. He sent His Son Jesus to resurrect again from the dead for us, that we might be delivered from the snare of the enemy, that we might be delivered from the deadly pestilence of sin. See, in the short term, we see God and we trust God as one who's going to get us through this month, right? But even more, we see a big God who's going to get us through the very things that seek to destroy us. It's going to deliver us from the snare of the one who's out to trap us. He's going to deliver us from the pestilence, the disease, even of sin. He is a delivering God, but He's also a protective God. Finally, just hear verse 4. "He will cover you with His pinions, His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler." He is a protective God. He's a faithful God. There's a story I heard this week of some firemen that went into the ravages of a fire that happened in Yellowstone Park. So one of their big forest fires, they went afterwards, and as they went through the woods discovering the damage that had been done, they came across a bird sitting on his nest. And that bird had suffered the ravages of that fire. In fact, the fire had come so swiftly and with so much heat that it sort of petrified the bird on its nest. And so as the firemen came upon it, they kind of knocked the bird, the dead mother bird off the nest, and what do you think they found underneath? But 3 chicks that were alive and well. This is that picture, right? And it's not just the picture of God with his feathers, his wings that help us to find refuge, his faithfulness as a shield and a buckler, but we see the reality of Jesus in that. That one who gave his life, one who died for us that we might indeed live. Just like that mother bird stayed steadfastly upon her nest in the midst of danger. Christ has died steadfastly in our place, that we might live even as ones who have been unfaithful, ones who have been sinners, one who at times have been in enmity with God. But God loved us so much that he gave us Christ, that Christ would die in our place, that we might live. Wise believer in Christ, don't be a fool today to say that there is no God, or to doubt that God is in the midst of even our suffering. He is a big God, and we run today to dwell in the shelter of who he is, abide in the shadow of who he is, and say, it is in our God that we trust, trusting that he will deliver us from the snare of the fowler, from the deadly pestilence, and to believe that he is faithful, that he will cover us with his feathers, that under his wings we will find refuge, that his faithfulness will be a shield and a buckler. In the days of COVID-19, in the days of whatever uncertainty you might face, but certainly in the days of Easter, might we be mindful today of a good God, big God, who loves us and cares for us even in our uncertainty, even in these days of COVID-19 and days even moving beyond them. Indeed, move, wise believer, to his shadow, to his place, and cry out today in faith, oh God, you are my refuge and my fortress. In you I trust.